Let's talk about 10 10-frame activities that you can use right away in your classroom. The first is an Old Faithful Quick Images. Quick Images is a number sense routine where you show a 5-frame, 10-frame, or 20-frame for less than 3 seconds, and then the students will have to tell you how many they saw and how they saw it. So for example, if I had a 5-frame and I showed 3, they might say, well, I just knew it was 3, but they might also say, well, I saw 2 empty spaces, and so I knew that it had to be 3 because 3 and 2 more is 5. You can elicit a lot of interesting conversations and hear their thinking about different numbers and how they work. The next activity is called Say It, Build It, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You say the number and then they have to build it on their 10-frame. And so when they do this, you can look for students who every time you give them a new number, do they have to start from 1? Or can they just switch the number that they started with, like take a few away or put some on to make the new number. Neither one of these strategies is wrong, but one is more efficient than the other. So you would like students to become more efficient in their strategies, but what's most important is that whatever strategy the students are using makes sense to them. So as long as the strategy they're using makes sense, they can keep doing it, and just give them the opportunity to work with other students who have different strategies or have other students explain their strategies so they can start to think about those as well. The next game is called 10-frame Pick, Build, and Cover. So to play this game, students would pick a card, either a 5-frame, 10-frame, or 20-frame on it, and then they have to recreate that number on their 10-frame and then cover that numeral on their play mat. And so the goal is that they will get all of the numbers by the time that they finish. And this game is great because it's giving students an opportunity to make a matching set to figure out how many there are. Some kids might need to count, some kids might not need to count. And it's easy to give this game a new spin if you give students a different manipulative. So maybe you're using double-sided counters, cubes, those target erasers, anything really they can use to count. The next game is called Spin and Build. And to play Spin and Build, kids would spin the spinner and then build that same number on their 10-frame. And then on their optional recording sheet, they can write down the number that they got and what their 10-frame looked like. So they're getting some number writing practice in, and they're able to not only build, but transfer the 10-frame number that they got to paper, and it also gives you a record to see what they're doing, if their numerals are matching the value. And this game has a lot of different versions on with visual support. So it has like a 10-frame numeral track on the bottom, so kids can match the numeral to the value if they're still working on that. And if they don't need it, you don't have to use that version of the recording sheet. The next game you can use during your graphing unit, but it still has some number sense built in. It is called Roll a Number Graph, and I have yet to find a kindergartner who didn't love rainbows. So the way that this Roll a Rainbow Graph works is that students have a die, a 5, 10-frame, 20-frame die, and then they roll. And the first number is color-coded in red, the second number in orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. And so every time they roll that number, they would color in one space with the same color that matches their 10-frame. And so they're trying to see which number they roll the most by which tower, I guess, fills up the fastest. A funny story about that game, I was showing my students how to play that game on the document camera, and they got it right away, but my assistant was out, so I had a substitute in, and the substitute was like, how do they know what number to color what? And one of the kids just looks at her and goes, it's color-coded. Like the obviously was implied, and I was like, well, I'm glad that you guys understand what to do because you're the ones who are actually going to be playing this game. Moving along, next game is called Fishing for 10 frames. It's basically Go Fish, but instead of just the little fish, the fish are arranged into 10 frames. You can get that, small group activity, and at the same time, they're seeing numbers organized in a 10 frame instead of scattered, they're seeing them arranged. The next is kind of a 2-for-1 because the concept is very similar. The only difference is if you're rolling or spinning. So this is roll and write or spin and write. So your students would roll their die or spin the spinner, and then whatever number they land on is the number that they write. And there's versions with like tracer numbers on if they're still working on writing their numbers, and versions without. You can also double-side it, so they practice one with the numbers, one without the numbers. And it makes a very simple game different. If you're using different dice or using a spinner, it can create some interest in a game that they might have actually already played before. The next game is called Empty the Board. So the way that they play Empty the Board is they have a mat that has the numbers on the bottom or the 10 frames on the bottom, and then empty spaces. So to start, they have to put a cube or some kind of manipulative in each space, and with every roll, they take off one of the cubes or manipulatives that you're using until their board is empty. The next two are more hands-on. The first is Play-Doh mats, which is always a lot of fun, great for their fine motor development. So they will create a number with their Play-Doh, whatever the mat is, and then also fill in a 10 frame with however many Play-Doh circles match the number. The next activity is called Wiki Stick numbers. So they will create numbers with their wiki sticks, and each card on the bottom has a 10 frame that matches. So they're looking at number formation. They're also looking at the value of the number. And if you're wanting a bonus, quick, no prep activity, this next activity is a color by code. But the thing that's different about this color by code is it has 10 frames on it, but it also has rec and recs and base 10 blocks and numerals. So they're getting lots of different representations of the same number. I'll have a blog post as well as a link to all the activities mentioned down in the description box below, and I will see you next time.